All right, we're here. Now,
Oh,
hopefully you're here too, but we don't know for sure. Now, I'm Teepa, this is Christine, and that's Emilio. Now, Emilio's sort of in charge of keeping track of what's happening out there on YouTube. So Emilio has two screens, and you will watch his head go boom, 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 because what he's doing, he's keeping track of us on one screen, and he's keeping track of you over on YouTube on another screen, because that's how he'll keep up with comments and thoughts and ideas and information that you want to share with us. And Emilio doesn't usually have this job. So it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, because he's going to have to do what is usually Rachel's job, because Rachel watches the chat and then helps us get information from the chat to share back and to offer up and to answer questions. And so this is the first time we're doing it like this. And you can tell by the look of Emilio that Emilio is really focused. Now, I'm hoping that the focus is a good focus, but he hasn't said anything yet. So Emilio, how's it going for you?
It's going good. There are two people watching.
Oh, good.
For some reason, it's showing up as private, even though I know it's set as public when I hit go live. So I don't know what the difference is. Okay, there it is.
Really
There's
are asking
11.
the right person about that.
There's 11 folks watching right now. So
oh, okay. Well, apparently it's more public than you would have thought, even though it says it's private. There's lots of people joining us, or at least they're coming on board. So our topic and our thing that we're talking about today, we've got two things we're going to talk about. They're both kids' books. And the first one came out a little bit ago, called Living with Dementia, as part of the series. They were actually written by my daughters. Wonder if they're planning ahead. Or maybe they're just being responsive to what we've heard, because the reason the books were written is at the time that we first started thinking about this, there were very few books out there that were designed for young children who are younger. But when we actually created the book and the book was written, the book was illustrated, we found that there are other ways this can be used other than just with young children. It turns out that showing somebody these books sometimes starts a conversation. And it also alerted us to the idea that at some point we may have to have different books. One that says, my dad is living with dementia. My mom is living with dementia. My grandpa is living with dementia. My uncle, my aunt, my next door neighbor, my friend, or I'm living with dementia, because that would have a different meaning for a kid. But I'm living with dementia could be how people are feeling if they're living with someone who is living with dementia and you're a kid. It feels like I'm living with dementia. And that's not just kids. There are many adults who actually feel sometimes like I'm living with dementia. Well, what I'm doing is living with someone living with dementia, but dementia takes over our life, and it ruins the relationship I used to have with somebody. And these books are about trying to keep a relationship solid and okay, not always positive, but okay, through some rough spots, and to allow us to celebrate some good spots. Because first and foremost, we believe people are people. And then some people, unfortunately, start living with dementia. And it's not what anybody wants in your life, just like we don't want anybody living with cancer or someone living with diabetes, but it happens. And so to not talk about it allows us to avoid the idea that it's happening, but it's actually not avoiding the reality that it's happening. And it is impacting things. So Christine just had a recent experience in her own life, and I want her to share that before we move into the books, because this is an example how Christine, she actually works for Positive Approach to Care. And she is interested in, and Christine, what is your primary focus here at Positive Approach? What kind of things do you do? What are some things that you do?
Some things that I do is as I work with our products development team to create new products, but also to pull some stuff together so that there is something that you can hold in your hand, and all the pieces that go along with illustration and words and editing and the actual physical book. So that's a large part of what I do, and pulling ideas together so it's something that we can share.
Oh, but so that's your job at Positive Approach to Care. But what else do you do in the world?
I have some kids. I'm
Oh,
a
you have
mom.
kids. Uh-huh.
Yes.
And a
Yes. I'm a
mom and a
daughter.
dad.
Mhm.
Oh, your mom. You got a mom and a dad, and you're a wife, and you got kids. Yeah, you don't have grandkids yet, though.
I do not have grandkids. I have a grandmother.
You
No
have a
grandkids.
grandmother. Oh, okay. So you have a grandma as
I
well.
do have a grandma.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So what if your grandma was living with dementia?
This would be helpful for my kids.
It would be helpful for your kids. If you knew nothing about dementia,
Hmm?
you weren't really wanting to get into a big tome, and you don't really want to, you're not so sure, you want to get into it, but it's true, it's happening.
Right.
Could this possibly be a first read for you? Just taking a look at it, see what it has to say.
Absolutely, it could. And I might be jumping too fast, so stop me if I am. But especially the information in the back, which will help me understand what is dementia in the first place.
Yeah, because during the kids thing, I'm going to give a motion like this. We sort of give it light strokes. We give some signals and symptoms and signs that what Timmy's experiencing with his grandma and what his mom is experiencing, we got some dementia going on. Some of it's not so bad. Some of it's rough, and some of it's, it just is what it is. But in the back, we get into a little more of the details. And this is for people who like details. Now, if you don't like details, you don't have to look at it. But this one image, if I show this to a kid, might not have a whole lot of meaning other than, what do you think a kid would look at this? So what's weird about this, Christine? Look at this picture. What's kind of weird?
Well, usually the rain is outside of an umbrella and not inside an umbrella.
Oh, so this is unusual because it has an umbrella and all the raindrops are under the umbrella. Yeah, that's kind of weird, huh? So all the rain, or what else has drops like raindrops?
Tears.
Teardrops. So many people, when they look at dementia, guess what they feel? They feel happy or they feel sad? Sad. So under this rain umbrella called dementia, we have a lot of different ways in which brains change and brains develop dementia. And none of them are super happy. I mean, it's not like, oh, great. Yeah, no, I'm not stupid. I work with dementia a lot. Nobody wants dementia, but if it turns out that what you have is under this umbrella, again, now, do you think a kid, I'm curious with your kids, because I know you've probably done some things. If you were to say, hey, Emma, because Emma's how old?
Emma is 6.5.
Emma's 6. Emma's 6.5. So Emma's learning some things like reading.
Yes.
So I bet you she's pretty curious about words.
Very curious about words.
Has she had a chance to look at the umbrella?
She has glanced at it, but hasn't really studied it.
Oh, you don't imagine that she's probably all that interested to get into the details?
Not the details, but she likes colors. She loves the colors.
Yeah, she'd like the colors. So we use colors because it draws your eye, not just of children, but of human beings. Many people like colors. So, Christine, when you look at the words under there, if you knew nothing about dementia, what would you suddenly have an awareness of here?
I would immediately see that there's a lot of different names or titles of underneath this big thing called dementia. So maybe that's telling me there's different types, different kinds.
Yeah. And over on the next page, then we go into, what is this thing called dementia? Timmy and Grandma were wondering, what is dementia? Dementia is something called an umbrella term because it covers over 120 different forms of brain change. The different types of dementia affect the brain differently. There will be things that are lost, but more importantly, there are many skills that remain. Knowing more about how to focus on what is left will help everybody have a better time when they're together. So, Christine, I'm just curious. So now when you're looking at this page, having heard this information, what does that tell you?
That tells me that it's not just a one size fits all kind of thing. And it tells me.
So now, what are you wondering about Grandma?
Well, now that you're telling me there's different types and that they affect the brain differently, I'm really curious what type of dementia Grandma has, because the doctor just said dementia.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, an adult is having an aha moment of, wait a minute, I thought it was just dementia. I mean, I thought all dementia was that one right there.
Alzheimer's. I've heard that more than any of the others.
And son of a gun, if in a kid's book for the first time, I don't suddenly realize, oh, wait a minute. And it seems to make a difference because what's going to work and what's not is going to be different. Well, son of a gun. So this is that moment where for us, this book was not just created as a kid's information book. It's also a potential first step forward for a group of individuals that may not even appreciate that in that moment, they don't know what they need to know. They don't have an awareness that they might like to have in order to actually live with dementia. Because what you thought you understood was, one size fits all. And what you're finding out is, and you might even start then looking at, well, how would this be a different book or a similar book if it's my dad, some kid's dad who has dementia, or it's a teenager reading this book to a younger brother or a younger sister. So, Christine, I asked you early on, what it is you do with PAC, but it turns out that you were doing something with your daughter. And you just mentioned it right at the start. So I want you to go ahead and share that if you would, because this is that moment where what else could you do with this book? What else is a possibility? Reading it to kids, great. Talking about dementia with kids, perfect. And we're going to get into that. But what did you do? Now, this is a curious thing. What happened?
Because PAC is not just something I do, it's part of who I am. I always have something with me because you never know who you're going to run into or when the time's going to come where you want to share something. But this particular time I had a meeting with someone who does a lot of work with my daughter.
Hang on a second, because I believe, if I remember, you have a pediatrician. And when your kids went to the pediatrician, you did what?
I took this with me. I prepared my props.
Oh,
yes.
Because pediatricians see lots of kids, and they see lots of kids in situations where the kid is coming in for maybe a well kid check. Maybe they're coming in because they need shots. Maybe they're coming in, but they see kids pretty regularly. And kids belong to families, and families have people in them that are living with dementia. And what we're really saying is, and what Christine is saying, she took these along because this is a place where we talk with kids about eating well and exercising and doing things like that. And we want kids to be healthy and well and have good relationships. Well, if we don't provide them with resources, how are they going to be able to do this thing? And if we think magically these books just pop out of nowhere, someone has to make an effort to share what's happening in the family. How's your family doing? When an adult goes into the doctor, Have you had any feelings of depression or stress? How's your stress level? What kind of family history do you have of whatever? So when you fill out forms for your kids, does it ask about family history for your kids as well? They ask you about what the family history is?
Not really like that. Not that I recall.
Interesting, isn't it?
That
Which
is
is
very
just
interesting.
kids are not going to run into this thing when in fact we know that at least 2 out of every 5 families at any moment in time is experiencing some kind of relationship with a dementia. And this idea that we don't prepare children for atypical, not normal aging, it starts to make it feel like all the things that happen are just like typical aging, I guess, then. And it makes it harder and harder for us to recognize when something's going on that might not be typical aging, and it might cause us to want to develop some new abilities, some new brain function. It might cause our brain to need to do a little homework so that we can have good relationships and not lose them. So you actually have shared with your pediatrician, so maybe rather than just magazines laying out in the front area, maybe there could be a couple of these books laying out in the front, and it could get kids asking questions. And those are healthy questions to ask. There could be books out there saying, John is living with cerebral palsy. Jack has problems with, Jack is living with autism. It's living with, not there are problems having. It's like, so if you notice this is a word you might start to hear and might start to notice. Somebody might say this word. That's real different than, grandma's demented.
Oh, yes.
And we don't use those phrases because this is the language that we want to help people appreciate. Ultimately, we'd love to have grandmas living with brain changes. That would be a great, and so are you.
Truly, where's my coffee?
Where's your coffee? Yeah. So Christine, the most recent experience though wasn't at the pediatrician's office. I just wanted to throw that out there because I think, again, thinking more broadly, if we want to advocate and be an advocate for this idea of inclusivity, and dementia is part for many people of living your life. And it doesn't need to be this hidden thing that everybody's embarrassed by. It's like, well, yeah, no, that's what's going on. Some people have diabetes, some have hypertension, some have dementia, some have strokes, some people, and so recognizing typical, atypical neurodiversity is really important, we believe, because that's going to make people more functional human beings. And we've been really remarkably impressed with what kids are able to learn and do and how they apply what they learn and do. So Christine, you went beyond the pediatricians though. So tell me more about this latest event. I interrupted you, I apologize.
I had an appointment with somebody who works with my daughter closely all the time. And so in preparing for going to meet with this person, I grabbed these as I was leaving the house because I wanted to, at some point, weave it into the conversation, share it, get her thoughts, get her advice. And so
before you go further, that was a really important thing. You took it not so you could tell her about it, but so that you could ask her for her thoughts, her input, which would mean she'd have to do what?
Read it, accept it, read it.
Okay, so you made an offer. It's always an offer because we initiate, we prepare, you prepared, and then you initiate an offer to participate. And then we do this evaluation because you were going to ask her for her input. What did she think? What seemed to read well? What maybe doesn't read well? What would she recommend? Where could she see this being helpful? Would she ever consider reading this to kids? How many kids does she think in her classroom, if she has one, might actually be coping with this? How many kids in a library setting who are listening at story time might say, oh, my grandma has dementia. Oh, my daddy might, so that the secret is not a secret. The word you thought the kids didn't even realize was being used. Oh, they know. They pick up an amazing number of words, and they hear them and they store them. And then they may have some really interesting thoughts about what they mean if every time is, oh my gosh, grandma's got dementia. And you know what? She's driving me nuts. It's like, oh, so dementia makes people go nuts.
A good thing. Uh-huh.
What do you mean it makes you go nuts? You know, and so like, wow, so grandma's like a squirrel? I mean, and so those flight of ideas, which for us as adults, it's like, that's not what I was talking about. Without having conversations around what you just heard and what you thought you heard, we don't know where kids are. And all too often, kids are taking in a lot more than we think they are, but not necessarily in a healthy, good way. And so sometimes it will blow up or show out in an unhealthy way. Or we could be sending messages we didn't intend to send, but they pick up on messages. So you got ready to share these two books. I've interrupted you twice or interjected in twice, but you're doing well. So what do we got going here?
And so I simply said, I have been working with a company who created these, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. And that was it.
Okay.
And this person took them and looked at them. How would you know, Christine? How would you know? This other person in my life was just diagnosed with dementia. And we don't know how to have a conversation about it. And here you are handing me these. So you never know.
You never know.
You never know.
You never know. And you never know when it could be that moment where it could make a difference. So the first book, Grandma's Living with Dementia. If we were to turn to page, like, let's just, there's a little piece of information here at the very beginning, and this is, information, again, the small type, if you're looking at it, is for the adults. Now, it's not like kids can't read it. It's not like we're not saying, this isn't for children. But in the middle, let's say here, the wiring in the brain isn't working properly. So it will be helpful to use your healthy brain to connect to them. Try not to say, don't you remember? Or Mom, I'm your daughter. So it allows us to talk to adults and identify some of the common behaviors or reactions or words that aren't particularly helpful, and instead give them some alternatives. So reminding them or pointing out mistakes can cause frustration and pain, but this isn't the fault of your loved one. This is the effect dementia has on their brain. For us who work with dementia a lot, it's obvious, but we hear a lot in families how I feel like she knows what she's doing. I mean, sometimes she does this on purpose. And this is an opportunity before we start reading the story to get a little info in about the beliefs and what we know about this thing. And it gives you, like, the best thing to do is introduce yourself, use their preferred name, and use your knowledge of them and their interests to make the visit the best it can be. So that's the preset for this. That's the preset for the adult. Now, sure, you can try that and you just share it with kids. Okay, so you can do this. We actually do classes for kids that are champion classes. But it talks about how to use the book, and then we get started. So the visual. What are you thinking right away when you see this visual? Because the visual is a really strong visual. What's the very first thing that comes to mind?
Grandma is somewhere else other than the little boy.
And where's Mom?
It looks like Mom is standing right there too.
Okay, is she with the little boy?
With the little boy.
And who's the other person there?
That we don't know yet, but looks like a helper maybe.
Looks like
or assistant or somebody with grandma.
Or somebody. Does grandma look like she's like not wanting to see anybody?
She looks rather excited.
Does she look fairly functional?
Does to me. Yeah.
She has a really
Mhm.
small base of support. I mean, that's pretty good standing balance right there. If you ask me, she's got her hand way up in the air, all that stuff.
Mhm.
All right. So the first statement, go ahead and read the beginning there.
On Saturdays, we always go to Shady Grove Home to visit my favorite person in the world, Grandma. Ever since she realized she was living with something in her brain called dementia, she moved into the coolest home I've ever seen. She lives with 15 other people, and there are all kinds of extra helpers around. Sometimes I really wish I could live there at Shady Grove with her.
All right. So this is a story about a kid and his mom visiting grandma. What is unusual about this story compared to what most of you out there would have said about grandma, Shady Grove home, helpers in the building, visiting, my favorite person, those kind of things? So how typical or atypical might this setup feel to some people? What do you think?
To some people, it might be very foreign because she realized she was living with something called dementia and she moved.
Oh, so grandma is the one who noticed that something's happening and she chose to move into a place that had more support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So some people will go, well, that's not what happens with dementia. Here's what I'm going to tell you. It is true. When you've met one person living with dementia, you've met that one person. And if that's your entire experience, you can start to believe that that's what happens when people get dementia. But in fact, we have many people in our world living with dementia who they were the very first person who noticed something that was going on, and they made arrangements because they were capable at that point of making arrangements to try to plan for how and where they wanted to get their care done. What it might also allow us to say, though, is if that's not the case, talk to me a little bit about how the decision to live where someone is living was made. So I would be okay using this in a support group to start a conversation about, let's talk about where everybody is. If I'm talking to care partners of someone living with dementia, and it's a classic, typical support group, I would say, so what seems reasonable or logical or consistent with your experience, and what's different from your experience? So so what else is a little different that would spark some conversation that people might look at and go, huh.
He really wishes he could live there.
Yeah, so this idea that where grandma lives is sort of such a cool place that we have a kid who's like, I'd like to live there because you get to have ice cream after dinner and there are people and they will let you play with the this and that, and everybody has their own room. And so all of a sudden seeing it from another perspective. So we have a kid who's sort of excited about the idea of going in, maybe even being there. What else might somebody in a support group notice here?
15.
There's only 15.
That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, so how many people live in the location where your person lives? And how many people came from a place where they were the only person or one of two people living in a space, and now we're moving into a space where there's a bunch of other people? So let's talk about, where people might receive care. So this, again, although it is a kid's book, and yes, we could do it that way, this could also be one page, could be a kickoff to talking about a number of experiences and talking about lived experience and talking about similarities and differences so that we can open a conversation of there are lots of extra helpers.
Lots of extra helpers. That must be nice.
It must. And so what it raises up for me is, are there places that have that? Are there
Mhm.
places where people, are there situations? Because we start to see Nana or grandma or the one person we have in our life, maybe there's other situations that are different, and we start to appreciate the diversity of dementia. Even when we're reading about one story of dementia, we get to see where things are similar, where they're different. So this is where, in the middle of the thing, grandma has lots of different emotions. Sometimes she's happy as a bird and wants to get into every kind of mischief we can imagine. So what do we have a picture of here?
A spilled juice or something, but it makes me wonder if it was an accident or if it was tumped over or tipped over or, you know.
Yeah, and so what do kids sometimes like to do? Number one, they do make mistakes, but what else happens?
See what happens with this liquid if I tip up this cup.
I bet I could get it to
Or if
bounce
I
on the edge.
swirl it
I saw
around.
somebody, you know what? I saw somebody do it with a grain of sand. No, salt. If you get a piece of, like if you dump a little salt on the table, you can get cups to bounce on their edge.
Good experiment. Let's try.
Should I try that with Emma? Do you think, is that what I?
During Teepa camp, when she spends a week with you, yes, feel free.
But during the story, we also don't avoid other emotions. So sometimes she's grouchy and cranky and she doesn't really seem happy to see us at all.
Mm-mm.
So,
yeah, not too happy.
Not too happy. So I'm curious, have you ever felt not too happy about being somewhere and having to do something?
Goodness, yes.
Could I do it with a kid? Could I ask a kid? Have you ever felt that way?
So Teepa, you're using this as an I share, you share kind of, it seems like.
Yeah, rather than simply reading the story, I want to bring you into the story because you all know me, if you know me, I believe in using experiential learning rather than simply telling people stuff. So for me, reading a book isn't reading a book. It's like, so sometimes she wants to play the name game. Guess who we are? And she's really good at pretending she doesn't recognize us at all. So what does the kid think? What do you think? Does the kid?
You think she's playing a game, just having fun, like the juice, the glass.
So what started all that off? Now I'm going to refer back to, what was that first page in the book that we were looking at there? That first page with the small print?
Yeah.
Playing the name game. Who am I? Who am I? Ooh, so, so I wonder if there's something else we could do so that grandma doesn't have to, quote unquote, pretend that she doesn't recognize us. Because in fact, the reality is, in that moment, grandma might not know who we are, not because she's not trying, but if she has Alzheimer's and she is moving further into her dementia, she might not actually know who you are. So how much more fine would it be to say, hey, it's Teepa.
Hey, Teepa.
Hey. And somebody could say, grandma, so you do it, Christine, because I'll be grandma. We'll role play it.
Teepa, it's Christine.
Christine? Huh. Well, you know, I have a little girl named Christy.
You have a little girl named Christine.
Yeah.
Tell me about her. What a cool name.
Oh, she's troublesome, but she's sweet as all get out, but troublesome. She likes to turn things over and watch them spill out.
Now, do you think she got that from you or her daddy?
Well, I think it was from her dad, I'm sure.
Must have been her dad, for sure. Yeah.
So if I were doing this with another adult and then I had kids, or even if I was doing it with kids, what did Christine and I just demonstrate? What did you just see us do?
How to connect. How to not say, hey, mom, who am I today? Hey, mom.
What do you mean, who are you today? I assume who you are usually are.
Well, what's my name? What's my name, mom? You know.
Know who you are? asking me that?
Yes, you do. Stop pretending. You know
Do
exactly
not
who
know
I
who you
am.
are. You've got glasses and you've got real pretty dark hair, but I don't know your name. Why would I know your name?
Well, because you're my mom.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I'm not that old.
Well,
Okay,
Mom,
pause.
come on.
So this is the phenomena that all too often people do experience, and they experience it because actually we don't ever train people in what to do. And so we make assumptions. So the first story is really, what would you say, Christy? Generally an upbeat story to help us really recognize, yeah, there are changes that are not so fun, but there are also some changes that if we do the right support, or even if we don't, they are not miserable changes. It's how we look at them and how we react to them that make a difference.
Right. And this is a good introduction book to the big picture of dementia. And so I love the different emotions of grandma. I love that they come together, and that Timmy is seeing, like you said, she's pretending. His perspective is different than ours as adults. And I think that's a really cool way to do this.
Yeah, and so it's acknowledging not all kids are going to be terrified by dementia. Not all kids are like, this is awful. I never want to go see grandma again. However, there are times when it feels like grandma doesn't like us, doesn't want us to be there. And it's like, well, that can be true too. It's not necessarily a good day. But now, have you ever felt grouchy and grumpy? What sometimes make you grouchy and grumpy? Because this can become a tool for awareness of what does make people grouchy and grumpy. Rather than immediately blaming it on dementia, what could we blame it on instead? Or maybe recognize it might be due to
something else, environment. I'm hungry. I have a need.
I didn't sleep well last night. My back is hurting me. I can't figure out where I am right now. I mean, there could be dementia, but there could be a lot of other reasons. And rather than making an assumption, when I think about why do I get grouchy and grumpy, sometimes people are making me do things I don't want to do when I don't want to do them. It helps us see humans as humans rather than the person living with dementia as a problematic human and everybody else is normal. And from a kid's perspective, it's like, well, sometimes, yeah. And with some support from adults, or sometimes with support from kids, adults can start to see things differently.
That's true. Very true.
All right. So that's book one. And there's lots of places and spaces in my mind of how this thing could be used differently. Now, if you guys out there have questions or thoughts about using this book and what you've done with it or what you would like to do with it, now's the time to start bringing some comments in, because Emilio's just sitting there with nothing to do. And he would love a job. So if you have any questions, any thoughts, any feedback, any particular thing on the first book, feel free to jump on in here and give us something. If you like the pictures, you wish something, you want something, you need something, now's a chance. Now, let's go to book two, because again, written by the same people that wrote the first book. Now, I'm wondering if Living with Me has created this need for the second book.
You asking me or you asking Amanda?
Well, no, I was just wondering. Because early on in my career in the world of dementia, I will tell you that Naomi File and I presented somewhere, and we were both, Naomi File is somebody who does validation therapy. And she really believes in the power of a previous life event and how it might be impacting current situations. And so one of the things she said early on that I heard her say is, swear a little now to save yourself trouble later. And so I have taken upon myself to go ahead and swear a little now. So later on, I won't be immediately identified as there's something wrong with her, because she never used words like that. Every now and then you guys will say, oh, well, she always did a little of that, but Now she's starting to do it in places and spaces I wouldn't think she would. So you know, like if you practice them appropriately. Now,
Mhm.
when I say bad words and appropriately, most people would go, that doesn't match up. I'm going to tell you, bad words exist for a reason.
They sure do.
Yeah. It turns out when you use what your brain defines as a bad word, it releases a chemical. And the chemical it releases drops your cortisol level.
So it really does make you feel better. I just had to
It
say it and
does.
get it out, and I feel better.
Yeah, it takes away some of the pain and distress. So actually using a swear word, a bad word, now whatever your bad words are, for me, the word, oh, I hate this. Hating something is a bad word. We aren't allowed to hate. So when I use the word hate, boy, ooh, that's a bad word. But once I say it, then I usually can back off. Well, I just don't, this coffee is not as, I wouldn't drink another cup if somebody gave it to me. It doesn't taste like I thought it was going to taste. But I might have said really outrageously, I hate this coffee. This is the worst coffee I've ever had in the world. Now, what do you notice I also do when I say the bad word?
Your face changes, your tone and intensity changes, and your body language too.
Because it's coming not from a cognitive thinking place. It's coming from a deep, primitive place. And so bad words are words that come from a place of distress. And so whether the bad words are swear words or sex talk or racial or cultural slurs or just ugly words, words that we consider ugly, they're bad, they're mean words. Those words are meant to shove, to push, to fight, to recognize something is not okay with me. And there's usually visual cueing that also goes with it and emotional evidence that something's not okay. So when we hear one of these bad words, our brain should take it and go, ooh, someone's not in a good place. Someone's brain is not working very well. Sort of like when a little kid, I don't know about you, but I think pretty much at some point, every little kid looks at an authority figure and says, I hate you.
Yes.
And then the next statement might be even harsher. I wish you were dead. It's like, and that's not actually exactly accurate, but right now I really resent your takeover. I really don't like that you're trying to control something about me. I want my freedom. I don't like this. And that's a developing brain. But I think we sometimes forget that when brains are doing the opposite, they're degenerating. Sometimes our efforts to be helpful are viewed as trying to control things.
Yeah.
So for me, this particular book actually should be reading material for every care provider who's ever going to work with people living with dementia. Because quite honestly, the idea that someone is inappropriate when they use those words says, I don't think you understand dementia. Dementia is the inability to control the impulse when I feel that urge to release this pain, this discomfort, this unacceptable whatever. And I've got to let it out. And it comes out as words. The reason we wanted to have words is I won't have actions. If I can't get satisfaction from words, the only thing left to me is action. So if I said hitting people in dementia, I bet you this would go off the shelves like nobody's business because everybody wants to know how to keep people from hitting you. But what I'm going to tell you is bad words in dementia is what we should be paying attention to and noticing, because it means something isn't right for me. And I'm trying to let you know about it by giving you verbal information. And that's what I have to offer you. And if you miss that information, we're going to have a hard time getting this back under control. So, Christine, how surprising was my introduction of this book to you?
I have never heard that phrase, cuss now so you can, what was the end of it? So it won't be so bad later.
Yeah, so you
Cuss
can
now.
keep yourself out of trouble. Yeah, so like save
Right.
yourself some trouble later on. Go ahead and cuss a little bit now. Yeah.
So I appreciate the way you connected that, introduced it, and because I had not thought about it that way.
I mean, and whether it's some people use the word sugar, but when I say sugar like that, I don't think we're committed to like, this is not sugar. This is not
Like,
sugar.
oh, fiddlesticks.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you've always used that word, I still wouldn't count on it. Because guess what?
Right.
Underneath the fiddlesticks, I'll bet you any money you got the other one in there. You've heard it. You know what it's for. You've heard somebody use it in the right context. And I do mean the right context, that moment of absolute, if I don't say something like this, I am truly going to do something I would not want to do. So I'll say it. And then I won't have to, because then all of a sudden my blood pressure goes down, my heart rate drops a little, and I've released it. It's gone into the world. And, it's a really good place to do it when nobody's around. And that's when I have certainly in a parking lot all by yourself, or when you're in the kitchen and you just drop the whole canister of sugar and it crashes and you've got it all over the place. When you just like you thought you did one thing and you look in the washer and it's like covered with little bits of tissue.
Oh,
No. Now, what did I do? You probably can't hear me on Zoom. What do you think I did with my foot as I looked in there? And
were you stomping?
I was stomping or kicking. Why was I stomping or kicking? Because all I said was, oh no.
You didn't get out what you needed to get out.
No.
I did not. That was a piece of information I did not have previously, is that actually saying a cuss word helps you feel better for a reason.
Drops your cortisol.
Yeah.
Sort of important to know. So in this story, what happens to Timmy this time? Because he has a plan when he goes to visit Grandma at the special place.
He does have a plan to see if she can fix something of his that broke.
Because she's really good at stuff.
She is good at stuff.
And
He
she
loves
likes
going
to
to
do
see her.
stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it was an accident.
Yeah, he tried to sit in it.
Oops.
The toy doll chair. He tried to sit in it and learned a lesson.
Well, but it broke. What do you think happened when it broke? So what do you think happened for Timmy when he sat and it broke?
I wonder if he cried.
Oh, so one of the things is if you don't get really upset and angry and maybe yell or use a bad word, you might cry a lot. Because what it means is something bad happened and I need a release.
So for different people, it comes out in different ways.
Yeah. Now, if I said, well, it's your fault, you shat in it.
Well, that doesn't help any.
Yeah, that's really not all that helpful. It's true, but it's not all that helpful.
It is true.
Why are you crying? You're the one that sat in the chair.
How many times have I told you before not to sit in the chair? This is what it's a consequence. This is what happens. You sit in the chair, it breaks.
I think they already had that consequence. That's why they were crying. So some of us have to have the experience to be able to learn from the experience. Some of us can hear it and that's enough. We don't want to do that. So it allows us to control the impulse to try sitting in it. For other people, it's not enough. I have to actually try it out to see if you're right. Because you could be wrong. I don't mean to tell you you're sometimes not right. Sometimes you're not. So in those moments, that's that opportunity we have. So while Timmy is coming and mom is going to go meet with the lady who's in charge of the place. We don't know what about. But so let's look at page 9.
Yes.
So who's missing from the scene?
Mom is not here.
And did mom know Timmy was bringing the chair?
Oh, good question. I don't know if she knew it or not. I would imagine.
Let's see.
My assumption is that she. He's not carrying a bag, so it doesn't look like he's hiding it.
No. So Mama's going to go see the lady in charge, and I got to be with Grandma to see if she could help me fix my chair.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I'm going to point out. I wonder if Mom thought this through.
Yeah.
Now, am I blaming Mom, or I'm just wondering whether Mom thought this through?
Mm-hmm.
Because did Mom sort of set Timmy and Grandma up?
She just kind of left them.
So do you
to
think
figure it
Mom
out.
thinks Grandma could put the chair back together too?
Possibly.
Oh, so we don't know who might not recognize Grandma doesn't have the skill that Grandma used to have in this moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, we aren't sure, but clearly in this moment, Grandma can't get the skill to work. I mean, she's pretty frustrated. She can't get it to do what she knows it should be able to do. And so in that moment, that's when she's got the word. I said it soft, so if there's kids around, they didn't hear it. Well, they probably did. What can I say?
It happens.
We all do it.
We do. And the little ones here. And then when they say it back, it's
Oh, yeah, that's when you do it. So that's when she gets pretty frustrated.
mm-hmm.
And so then who picked up the word?
Ooh. Well, Timmy did. Grandma
because-
said it. So
this is the kind of chair it is. Apparently, it's one of those chairs. So did Timmy in that moment recognize the word was a bad word?
he did not. He saw it as a descriptive word.
Yeah, he was just describing the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So he missed the cue that Grandma gave that this was not a good word. Because Grandma would never have used that word before.
Mm-mm.
And my grandchildren probably know a little bit more about when you should and shouldn't use that word. More than likely. Amanda's nodding her head. Yes, it's all true. So in that moment, what did Mom do? Because in our story, Mom has that moment of deer in the headlights.
She does.
And it took her a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then what did she do?
Timmy saw her do her deep breathing thing that she does when she gets nervous.
Oh, so Mom has started learning some skills to bring her own cortisol brain down. Because in that moment, Mom got her own dump of cortisol. Surprise. So what then happens is, all right, we figure it out. And the story goes on. But here's what's really important in this book. In this book, there is a good bit more at the back. What's at the back here, Christine?
A lot of time was spent on this to explain why somebody might say a bad word. And so we go into content information about the left and right temporal lobes, language on the left and
rhythm on the right, among other things. So this is where we're getting into some decent amount of brain content. Is the way we're approaching the brain content an accurate way of approaching it for people with different backgrounds, with different language skills, with different ability states?
Is it an accurate way to approach it? Yeah.
Effective?
It's different. It is effective.
Yeah. So the point of this webinar was to get us to look beyond just using the books as reading books to kids and recognize we've written the books, yes, for reading to kids, and it's meant to be entertaining. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to be interactive. It's also potentially useful at opening conversations and dialogues with people who aren't kids. You can start with kids, but a lot more people out in the world could stand to learn a little bit more about dementia. And sometimes reading a kid's book is short, it's fast, but in the back of the book, you might find some resources or some ideas for a conversation, might even raise up the possibility, I think I could use some help. All of a sudden, maybe some self-awareness. Maybe I could offer some help. I wanted to share this with you. Maybe I could notice something and make some adjustments. But all in all, the reason we write these books is because Dementia happens. And the question is, how do we help each other do better? So, any questions that have come in, Emilio? Everybody's just listening quiet.
Yeah, so far the comments on YouTube, on the YouTube live stream have been, see, somebody said they love the chart that you mentioned, that you showed at the beginning, and that it can be used by adults also to learn, so not just children. Somebody else mentioned that they love the use of plain language to explain a highly complex subject. These are great resources, not just for children, but again, also for adults as well.
Well,
And
an
somebody
example.
else.
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and then the last comment said that the S word was also their first word as a baby. So go figure.
Mine was running into a door and went SOB. Apparently, my mother pretended that she didn't know who the child was that had just run into the door. It was a glass door, and she was taking a driver's test in Washington State. And I was roaming about because she had to get her license renewed. And I was young and I was roaming about, and I went full tilt into the glass door, not realizing it was there. And I sat down on my behind apparently, and I went SOB. And I didn't, that's not one of my usuals, but she just kept writing like it wasn't her child. She didn't know who the kid was doing that. Yeah, just tell you, it's a long history apparently. Here's what I wanted to show you up close if you don't have the book yet though, and you are interested. We made two drawers, sets of drawers. And on the left one, this is like, we have language comprehension, speech production, and vocabulary. Over on the right, where we have the rhythm section, we have batter, forbidden words, chit chat or arguing, rhythm of speech, music, prayer, poetry, and counting, and automatic rhythmic actions. And this is what they look like when your brain is whole and fine. And this is what you might start to notice when I'm having trouble. So previously, I probably would have said, wow, this chair is hard to fix. Now, fix this shit. Because when I go to open my drawers, I can't find what I'm looking for. It's hard, and I'm not getting where I want to be with this project. So our conversations around the book are more than the book, but we have to have something to start the conversation. Yeah, it's called a prompt.
I'm so glad you said that, Teepa, because we did provide some additional conversation starters.
Yeah.
Amelia will drop in the comment section a link to the landing page for the children's for these books. And in the back of the books, there's a QR code that takes you directly there. And I know we're short on time, so quickly I'll just show you that on this page, you will learn more about these books that are coming up, how you can buy them on our store website or also on Amazon. A link to word games that you can play with kids, puzzles. And some of these really cute cartoon pictures have been turned into coloring pages. So print them out and you can create an activity with those that you are with. Also, here are some conversation starters. How do you get the conversation started? How do you continue a conversation? And coming soon, we'll be adding some videos of Teepa and Amanda's boys, Braden and Benji, from Sunday mornings, Time with Teepa.
All I can tell you is usually I'm not swearing, although it may look like I should on occasion.
And we have Timmy merch. Because these characters are so dear, we have a variety of merch options for you. So we designed this landing page to be helpful, to be useful, to be practical, but to be a tool you can use with these books to have a conversation.
Cool. So we want to thank everybody for being with us. If you have some thoughts or comments, that's what the system's for. And thank you. Good being with everybody. Take care.
Thank
all.
you.